Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Now I know I said last video and the video before that I'd be doing the best receive team, but some really cool new units have just come out and that completely changed not only the game but also specifically a lot of receive builds as well. So I thought that I would talk about these units instead. One, because they're really interesting characters in general and they were kind of talking along the lines of some of the things I suggested in a previous video like this one. But two, the other big thing is that they once again changed the way a lot of these receive teams could work, and I just thought they were really cool and they make me quite excited to play the game and talk about the game again. So that being said, let's just give them a quick introduction. So we all know about Yaku and Kita. I think what's really interesting is that actually they've done 4 characters for the Fireworks Festival, and the bonds are actually tied to alternating characters. So Kita and Yaku were released roughly within the same span, and then it was Suna and Teshimura, right? And the thing is about them is Teshimura has the bond with Yaku and Kita has the bond with Suna, so they're actually not all connected in the same way that normally you'd get SP units, right? And it's moments like this where I'm really glad that I'm a global player, because I'd be really annoyed if I got Yaku Kita thinking they would have a bond, to then find out they don't, and you need to pick up Suna as well, especially if you spent all of your diamonds on like the previous 2. Either way though, it's an interesting combo and I just kind of want to talk about more. So first one is Suna. I think Suna is pretty good overall. There's clearly really good combos between Kita and Suna. In general, like Kita will get rid of one of Suna's buffs, debuffs each time, which will then basically increase the amount of damage he does on his next spike according to his SR2, as well as also just get him down to the parameters he needs to, say, crit, do more damage, reduce his cooldown, etc. quicker. So overall there's really good synergy there. And what else have I got? And so what was interesting originally is that actually I thought Kita would be used in a receive based team, but as time's gone on I'm looking at this and actually the Kita-Suna bond and the way they function, I actually think they'd work better in a traditional Inarizaki quick attack team, right? The twins and quick attack in general don't use awareness as a skill, really. What they use is they use guaranteed crits through circumnavigating it, be that Kageyama's dominance buff, or or the Mia twins with the attack technique threshold and Mia's set skill. Suna can also crit off his SR2 once he reaches a certain threshold with getting rid of his stacks, and so ultimately that's where the synergy arises, right? It's like, well, Suna can crit without awareness, you know, the same goes for the other crits and all of that, but with a lot of the receive characters, you know, you look at the likes of Sakuza, Bakuto to a lesser extent, and you know, any typical receiving unit, so even like a Tanaka and Yamamoto, they use awareness still. It's only pure quick attack teams where you tend to have that thing which circumnavigates the awareness. It's not to say that it's not possible, but it would definitely be a lot more difficult to circumnavigate and work around because of the way Kita's debuff works. And I just kind of want to say that this is kind of what I was talking about before, having characters which will warp the game to an extent and you have to play them a certain way, and that will be something which we'll talk about more with the latest units which have been leaked and aren't even like released yet in terms of press either. Next, I kind of wanted to just briefly talk about Teshimura and Yaku. I mean, they perfectly embody the Nekoma receive based core and ethos, right? Like, so Teshimura's skill 4 literally will guarantee that he gets blocked, but in return it will reduce the block power of the block, which means you're more likely to be able to save off the block. Yaku also has a guaranteed save as well built into his kit. I think it's his skill 3. Yeah, the first save of each round will always be perfect, and as a result it just feeds into just buffing the team ultimately and creating a stronger and stronger spike each time, and they just feed off each other where he'll hit into a block to recycle the hit, but then he will save it, and then so ultimately you'll get like your Sakuza or your Liev or someone like that who will actually come in and be the one which gets the kill. And yeah, just in general I think there's really good synergy here with Nekoma, with Teshimura, and I do actually think that these two would naturally be played on the receive team, and I think they'll be on a very good end of the receive team as well. Yaku naturally makes sense with a lot of the best receive teams in the game. I do think Teshimura would be up there as well, and that's something which I think maybe needs to be looked at. Now, to me, the stars of the show are the newest two units which have been leaked. These two haven't even been revealed through the game devs or anything like that then. I think some data miners managed to leak it, and that is the Kuroo and Daichi school banner duo. Now, what's really interesting about these two is that, like Kita, the way you team build will kind of shift the game a little bit. Now, I know I talked about with Daichi before in my old video, but I recommended that if you put in a character, it would change the way the other characters kind of play. That's not quite what's happening here, but then equally, you still have a character which warps the way the game is played and the amount of characters you build for your team because of it. So, the whole thing around Daichi and Kuroo are this. So, every player from either Nekoma or Kuroo and then Karasuno for Daichi gives him a stack. And for each stack, you basically, it increases not only Daichi's stats, but then it would also result in buffs for your team down the line, right? So if you have 4 of the Karasuno players, including Daichi, you'd then get an attack and defense technique boost. 6, you'd then get stam regen, and then the team would also get stam regen off crit hits as well. And Daichi would also get a cooldown reduction on his ultimate. You know, his power spike will become stronger based on the amount of Karasuno players, to the point where actually this would hit low level multipliers, like very similar multipliers as an ultimate, right? So if you had 5 Karasuno players as an example, this power spike would actually be hitting the equivalent of your standard hit, your 260% multiplier hits, which I think is kind of crazy. So basically, you want as many Karasuno, or in Kuroo's case, once again, Nekoma players as possible to create a really good team. And I think that's really inherently interesting, that these characters get stronger the more of the certain types of players you have, and it's not based on quick attack or anything like that. It creates interesting synergies which you wouldn't see, right? So for instance with Daichi, you know, all the Karasuno players are basically quick attack players with the exception of Tanaka, and so running Daichi here kind of goes contradictory for that, because you'd normally want more quick attack players, right? But Daichi, if you run enough Karasuno players, would be so strong that it wouldn't even matter, which is, I think, is the most amazing thing. So I think this is what's really interesting. The bond is less interesting but still important. So if you wanted to run Kuroo and Daichi together, if one of the players has more stacks than the other, then the other player will at least have 4 stacks. So for instance, if you run a Karasuno team with Daichi and you also have Kuroo in there as a middle blocker instead of, I don't know, Hinata or whatever, so you run Kuroo Suki, then Kuroo would be guaranteed to have 4 stacks, because Daichi would have say 5, Kuroo would have 1 because it would just be him, so therefore his stacks would then become 4. So I definitely think there's room for these characters. They're extremely strong, like I said, the more characters you run. I would say the things I'm looking at the most right now is I'm more looking to Daichi, and actually I think both are good. I think Kuroo works really well in potentially the new best receive teams. So, you know, when I'm looking at Kuroo at the minute, I'm thinking something like this, right? So the other important thing to note is with both of these units, if you can get them to, if you have at least 5 players in total on their side, you're essentially getting 7 stacks eventually. And at 7 stacks, you do tend to get major buffs, right? So you've obviously got the general increase in that's an extra 20% in general stats for Kuroo. But then that's also, but in this case, that would also be an attack and defense technique boost. And also he would gain a new save skill as well. So it's little things like this where you gain a lot from having those 7 stacks. So as long as you have your 5 at skill resonance 2, you already reach that critical mass, which I think is really, really useful. But anyways, to get back to it, you want to aim for your 5 so it would go with something like this. You'd run Yaku, Ken, Liev, you know, best receive team at the minute, then probably Yamamoto, and then that would be your 5, right? And already you've got a really good combo there. Kuroo can work as the other middle blocker. I kind of sometimes think that Liev would work better as an opposite, and being able to play him with that. So I question if you can maybe do something in this case, something like this with the Winter Sports Duo. Obviously, they're very good, but if you didn't want to run the Winter Sports Duo, I think there's definitely a way in which you could argue you could run Teshimura, and then you could run another middle blocker instead. What that middle blocker would be, it's kind of up to you to an extent. You could run Ene, Tsukishima, and then that's kind of it, because Tendo, maybe Tendo to a lesser extent, if you can get the awareness up, but I don't know how useful that would be. But either way, you've got a good combo there, and I think this whole unit would work really well. And it's really nice to see as well that you can create a really good team outside of running the Winter Sports Duo now. I'm kind of sick of their combos being so useful, and yes, I think you would be, especially on an offensive team, be better off running them here. Like, this would be better, but it's not to say absolutely needed, you know what I mean? So for a Karasuno team, when we're looking at Daichi, right, I think this is where it gets a little bit more difficult to build, because with Karasuno you need as many players as possible, but because you're running the Jazz Trio, because that's got the most amount of SPs in them, which have like bonds and whatnot, you're kind of looking at a situation where, alright, you then want Tsukishima as well. The only other person you could add from Karasuno is Tanaka, really, or you could maybe run Suga. But then if you're running Suga, I don't really think he contributes enough to justify it, right? Because especially if you've got the Daichi stacks, you've got the stamina regen already. You don't need more stamina, but you still need the other setter. You need at least one more person with a set skill for this Jazz Trio to work. So in my opinion, how I would run this is I would probably run something like this with Osamu, and then I'd probably actually I'd be almost tempted to get Kuroo here, you know, and have Tsukishima function as more as a like hitter and less as a blocker, so you can go full into hitting here, and then you've got a really good team through that. But I just don't think it's worth running Sugawara here, because you're then in a situation where you haven't got enough cooldowns to be able to hit and rotate, and it just doesn't really work in my opinion. That being said though, Daichi 6 stacks also gets everyone's ultimates reduced by 2 net crossings, so there is potential for you to be able to run maybe another character here instead, because then you've got Tsukishima who can hit every... If you build him with block speciality, you can get him to a 2 net crossing cooldown, and you can get Osamu's down to a 6 net crossing cooldown. But yeah, like I said, I'm not convinced. I do think that you need the 3 hitters, because it just won't be quick enough, and I think you do need to specialize Tsukishima into the quick attack. But to be fair, I could be wrong, and there's more research you can do there. There's definitely an argument for Atsumiya as well, and then just kind of going like this and getting both the twins in instead, and then that way you hit your setter threshold again, like easily, and then with SR2 he gets a further 2 net crossing cooldown reduction, so you'd have 4 net crossing cooldown reduction on all like hits. That would not apply. That wouldn't apply to Daichi, unfortunately, because he's not a quick attack speciality, but it still would help. In general though, I think they're really interesting concepts, and they're quite strong as well. They do function a little bit differently. I think Daichi's definitely the simpler one, where he provides attack technique and stamina, and defense technique as well, and he just generally gets stronger with a bit of cooldown reduction and power spike and whatnot as well. This obviously synergizes really well with the twins and needing certain attack technique thresholds to hit and whatnot to get crits, but I wouldn't say it's anything too particular or fancy. Where I think Kuroo's is a little bit more complicated, not that it's difficult, but more in the sense of he buffs up everyone's basic stats and also has a nice receive. But then I think the thing which stands out is that actually really all he gains is he gains a crit here, and then at 6 stacks he actually gains a new skill, and that's kind of where things are really useful. He gains a bit of an attack and defense technique buff for the team, but where he really shines is the save stat, and that's purely because it synergizes once again with Nekoma being able to guarantee saves with Yaku, Kenma, etc. And those all buff the team quite a lot, because ultimately outside of that he doesn't actually gain that much. there's not much he gains from the stacks. So one thing I didn't mention is that I think where a lot, especially Daichi, will shine is not with creating the best team or whatever. It's actually defensively. So obviously in this game you always have an attacker and defender, kind of like a raid in Clash of Clans or anything like that, right? Where you've got the person who has got their stationary team, and then the other person which can adapt and change how they want to attack or do whatever they need to on the offense. So when it comes down to offense, Hiragami and Hoshiyumi are the best 2 units in the game, because once again they've got a counter bonus where if you counter the enemy team, all your team's basic stats are enhanced, and they're further enhanced for those 2 units specifically. However, defensively, you're never going to be countering the other team unless they're really, really stupid. So realistically, you need to bung that off and assume that that buff's going to be null and void. I think this is where the likes of Daichi will be actually really useful, right? So you run the best quick attack team in the game, which would be, say, something like... So say you're running the best quick attack team in the game, which would be something like this. Offensively, this is absolutely amazing because you'd pick a block team and you'd absolutely shred it to pieces. However, defensively, you're most likely going to go against a receive team, and then you're going to get countered and you're not going to be able to do as much as you'd maybe like. I think in those situations, that's where it would be useful to maybe sub these out. Obviously, if you've got both of them max dupe, and there are some of the only characters you've got max dupe, keep them in, of course. I know for me, for instance, my Hiragami's SR4. My Hoshiyumi is SR4. I haven't got Hiragami yet, it's not come out yet. So, obviously, I will probably keep him in because he's really important to my power level of my team, and I'll be using him a lot. But once I finally start to get my other characters caught up, and also strong, that's when we can start to consider stuff like, alright, well, defensively, we don't want to be running Hiragami and Hoshiyumi, who can we run instead? I think I look at this team, I think Daichi is the perfect player here, right? You put in Daichi, you put in Tsukishima, and then you've got the Karasuno team, and then you've still got the twins, and you've got your setters, and then you've got Daichi in the back, who's going to be very strong because you've got your 5 characters, your 5 Karasuno characters. At SR2, that means 7 stacks as well, which means you get your stam regen, you get your cooldown reductions, which also means, by the way, that this monster will be hitting every 4 hits, has a 4 net crossing cooldown. Even if you build Tsukishima offensively, and he has the 8 net crossing cooldown, you can get that down to 4 net crossings as well, with the skill resonance 2 of Atsumi Miya. So overall, it's just the offensive and defensive potential would be really, really strong with this team. You'd also have a more solid receiver in the back line as well, which is something that you didn't have before. So yeah, I just overall think that this is a very strong team defensively, and I do think that this would arguably be the way to go. If you're going to run a best quick attack team and you want to defend, this is probably what I'd choose at the minute. But yeah, those are my thoughts on both the units. Obviously, I've talked about Daichi more than I have Kuroo. That's mainly because I think Kuroo kind of just slots into where he was before. Like, you know, he does perform differently in that he can't guarantee that you'll lose a point, like you won't lose a point or anything off a block. But, you know, he basically has his block ultimate until he gets a perfect block. And so it works kind of similar in that, okay, cool, he's less countered by a quick attack team now, because obviously he's a receive based player, but it's fundamentally working very, very similar. And then he's got receive skills, and yes, there's less spirit, and yes, there's less like shared spirit buffs and stuff like that, but he still increases, you know, defense techniques and all sorts of other players, right? It's just a bit more spread out instead of on whatever row he is instead. But yeah, fundamentally he'll be on the same team. And overall, I think the character's really interesting. I love this direction, and I'm really hoping, in my obviously very selfish way, that we'll get like a couple more school banner characters. Obviously, there's not loads you can go for, because most of the characters in the game don't have big built-out school teams. But, you know, I look at the likes of, say, the school banner Rayon as like kind of the backbone of the team, or a school banner Iwazumi, or even Oikawa to an extent. I think these would be really cool to see. And then it's like, alright, you're an Albajoso fan, show it, and then look at all of the amazing stats and all of these amazing things you can show on top. I'd love to see an Arizaki one. I think Kita was the best option for that, so I think we might have to wait. Alternatively, they could go with Aran. Obviously, I've been looking for an Aran SP for a very long time, so I think that would be really cool. But I don't know if he's quite school banner material, because as much as he is kind of like one of the backbones of the team, I wouldn't say he is like the backbone in the sense of like the leader and the moral backbone. I think that more goes to Kita and then probably Aran when Kita's off court, because if you actually, you know, watch the show and, you know, look at it, the twins are the strongest players, but they're not like the leaders of the team or the court really. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. Here's to SP Aran, hopefully one day. But I love these new units. They make me super excited. I really want this Daichi one. And what I might have to do is I might have to go for Daichi and then come back, because I really want these receive units here. So like Kemaliev, Yamamoto, and Yaku. To a lesser extent Teshimura, but still applies. But I can't afford them. So what I might do is I might actually come back, because I'm going to get Jazz Trio. I might just actually wait and then pick up Daichi, get him to SR2, and then get these guys on the rebanners. That's kind of that's where my head's at the minute. Because I do think that we're looking at something like this without Hiragami and Hashimi would probably be the best receive-based team in the game at the minute. Maybe you're running, like I said, either Tanaka here, and if you're not running Tanaka, maybe you're running... If you're not running Tanaka, you could easily justify running Daichi here as well, because he would have a really strong spike because of having 4 stacks of fly with the bond. And then there's obviously, you know, the likes of Sakaza, and you could run... Oh my god, my brain's going. There's the likes of Sakaza and other characters as well, or you could even run a middle blocker like I suggested before. But these are just my thoughts. Obviously, let me know what you think. I think, like I said, these units are really cool. They add another dimension to the game where actually you do want some of the same school with these characters, because they create so many buffs for your team, but then also specifically that character. And it just makes me really excited as it adds another whole dimension to team building, because at the minute the team bonds are cool, but they're not very strong. So I guess this is a really good way to buff team bonds by creating a character which literally is all built around team bonds. But yeah, thanks guys. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys later.